the first question to kick things off is just please tell us a little bit about yourself, your path into publishing and your current role. So Ain, can you start us off, please?
Of course. Hi, really nice to see you all. So I'm Ain, and currently I'm working at Penguin Random House as the events program manager at Penguin Connect. And I guess trying to kind of condense my path into publishing in a nutshell, I did kind of a lot of work at the beginning, which was I want to say 5-6 years ago, trying to get some experience because I had no experience in the industry. So I volunteered in a charity bookshop. I worked for Christmas at Waterstones, trying to really understand what the sort of British, especially in the UK, publishing landscape was, because I am not actually from the UK, I'm from Italy originally. And then after that, I completed an MA at UCL, which was really helpful for me. And after that, I started my career in publishing with my first paid job in academic publishing. And then I later on moved into trade, then back into academic, and now I'm back into trade. So perhaps that's something that I can share a little bit more on today. And the last thing to mention, of course, is that I did volunteer with the SYP, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. So I was an events coordinator for the London branch, and then I chaired the SYP a couple of years ago.
Thanks. Yan, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Yan. My current role is International Marketing Executive at Collins, which is the education and reference imprint of HarperCollins UK. My journey into publishing is very interesting because I initially applied for the traineeship that HarperCollins run. I wasn't successful in getting it, but because there is a pipeline in their program, I managed to land a digital marketing internship through there and eventually got my first full-time role. I'm also on the SYP London committee. I was treasurer last year as well as this year, and I'm really excited to hear about some of the experience that the other panellists have about their journey into publishing.
And Sabby.
Hi everyone, I'm Sabby, and I've been in publishing for about, I think, around 8 years now. So I'll start at the beginning. So my publishing journey began when I was 18. So I decided to take a gap year before I went to university, and at the time I was curious to learn more about publishing. So I did some research to see if there were any publishers based locally where I live, which is in West Yorkshire, and I came across Emerald Publishing. So Emerald are an academic and scholarly publisher. And so I contacted them, and I completed 2 weeks of unpaid work experience at that time, which was really insightful for me at the time to be able to do that. And then they later contacted me and asked me to come back and to do paid work experience. So I ended up spending my entire gap year within that publishing group and just working with a lot of different teams. So I was working across sales, marketing, client support. I then went on to university, and when I graduated, I went to university in London, that's what I wanted to point out. So when I graduated, I moved back to West Yorkshire, and it wasn't really, I hadn't planned to go back into publishing, to be very honest. But I had kept in touch with people at Emerald, the teams that I worked with, and they contacted me and asked me if I wanted to take up a temporary role that they had, which was a sales support assistant role. And so I did take that role on, even though it was temporary. So I was temporary for about 16 months, and then I was offered the junior version of my current role, which was permanent. And then following on from that, I think it was 18 months later, I was then promoted to the manager level. So my current role is content licensing manager, and I'm responsible for managing all of our commercial licensing contracts for our ebooks and e-journals.
Thanks, Abby. And Kat.
Hi everyone, I'm Kat. So I started working in publishing around 6 years ago. Before that point, I did a degree in English literature at York, and then after I finished my degree, I had a year off working just for health reasons. And during that time, I did some volunteering at my local Oxfam bookshop, at my local library, and I worked for my local women's centre as well, doing sort of their marketing, and all that gave me some really good admin and office experience. And then a year after I'd done all of that, I started looking for work experience in London with publishers, and I really desperately wanted to work for Penguin. And I was lucky enough to get a work experience placement with them at Ebury and just completely fell in love with it and sort of knew that's what I wanted to do. Off the back of that, someone I was doing work experience with recommended me for a internship at a literary agency. So I started doing that part-time while still living in Derby and commuting to London. So that was a bit tricky. And then a few weeks after that, I got my first job, which was publicity assistant at Michael Joseph, which is one of the commercial imprints at Penguin Random House. And then I stayed at Penguin Random House for about 4 years, doing various publicity and marketing roles in a few different divisions, which was absolutely amazing. But then decided I wanted to move back to Derby from London, settle down a bit. And so I decided to go freelance, and I worked for a local book festival, Derby Book Festival, doing events organising for them. And then I worked as a freelance publicist as well, and I worked with And Other Stories, who are an amazing independent publisher in Sheffield. And then alongside that, I was doing a little bit of teaching as well at Derby Uni, and then eventually got offered a full-time permanent role. So my current role is lecturer in writing and publishing. So I teach on the undergraduate degree that we have and also the MA degree too.
Great, thanks guys. As you say, we've got a great panelist, so we're all very excited. So the next question is, what's the top resource you're always recommending to people who are looking to get into publishing? So again, if we start with you, Ain, where would you?
Well, it's a really good question. I think very recently I was opening up about the fact that I really struggled because there's just like so many different publishers, and like publishing is actually quite a big industry in terms of all the specialist areas and obviously the locations all across the UK. So it can be quite daunting. I think that was also one of the reasons why I joined an MA, to kind of like get a real understanding. But today, if I had to give an advice, it would be definitely to start with the SYP, because it does have, even just the website, it has like lots of information around jobs, about roles, profiles, and obviously you can kind of like get into your local branch or whatever is closer to you and attend some events, and that's a really good starting point. And then also I just wanted to mention, I have created like a blog post that has got lots of resources, and I kind of like tried to condense everything. So I've shared it on Twitter, so you can go and check it out. But basically have a think about kind of like looking at all the different types of publishers, all the different kinds of like, people that advocate for different things in publishing, any recruitment agencies. It's really broad. So I think we definitely need to do more to try and make it easier for people to understand how to get into publishing.
Fantastic, thank you. If we go on to you, Yan?
Well, when I think about what it was like for me to find resources for getting into publishing, which was about 2 years ago, I just finished my MA in Classics at Durham, and I was scrambling around trying to race down for all these interviews and open days, and actually what I really should have done was just to look online instead. I think Twitter and Instagram are an amazing resource. It's free, it's a great community. Like, if you haven't followed certain people on Twitter and Instagram, I would highly recommend it. For me, someone like Robin from Prod Squad Books is incredible, because if you're interested in production, or if you don't know what it is, or if you just want to get really kind of technical and nerdy about all the different things, different language that is involved in publishing, it's a great place to start. But the other thing is that it's quite often a place where people will post any internships that they might have going on. You might be able to find a mentor. It's just a chance to connect with different organisations, get a flavour of the books that they're publishing within each imprint, see if that's what you're necessarily interested in. And in terms of actually finding tailored publishing based job opportunities, I found Creative Access was really, really good as a BIPOC person trying to get into publishing.
Thank you, and I agree, Twitter is where I go for everything, so it's a great suggestion. Sabby?
So I'm going to recommend the Scholarly Kitchen, which is an independent blog that's run by the Society of Scholarly Publishing. So I don't think there's enough visibility about academic publishing in general, academic and scholarly publishing. So I definitely, please visit that blog. So they have a group of chefs who all contribute blogs to the Scholarly Kitchen, and it's on a range of topics across the industry. And also they relay a lot of real world themes that are going on right now and bring that into the blog too. So it's really great to read from that standpoint. I'm not too sure if the blog itself has job postings, but you should be able to link to the Society of Scholarly Publishing website, where I believe they do have a jobs board. So if you're interested, just have a look through their websites. So that's a resource that I would recommend from a professional standpoint. From a personal standpoint, I'd probably recommend, and this isn't a publishing related resource, but it's more of a kind of self-development resource. It's called the Lessons Learned podcast by Komal Minhas, and I think it's brilliant. It's just, I've really enjoyed listening to it, so I would recommend checking Komal out. I think her website is komal.com, and you can get access to the podcast through there. She is a resilience educator, and I just think that she's brilliant, and I would recommend her podcast to everyone.
Amazing, thank you, Sabby. And Kat?
I would definitely echo what Jan said about Twitter. I think Twitter is such a useful place for people in the book world. I think if you go on there and, first of all, follow publishers to find out what they're doing and keep up with what they're doing. Also follow people who work in publishing, because you get a really good insight into what their jobs are like, and they can sort of post opportunities as well. So definitely Twitter. But then I'd also recommend The Bookseller, which is our industry trade magazine. And they do have a lot of articles on there that are behind a paywall, so you can't read them, but some of them are free. And so I definitely recommend having a read of that. And something that I would say is sign up to the newsletter. So again, that's free, but it comes into your inbox every morning, and it gives you the kind of top news stories for the day. And pretty much everyone in publishing will read that every day. So that can kind of help you when you're going to interviews, to show that you have commercial awareness of what's going on in the industry. And also they have a jobs newsletter as well. So they post what jobs are sort of coming up and available.
Fabulous, thank you. Loads to get people started. So next question is, for those starting out in the industry, it can seem very selective and very opaque. It's difficult to know exactly what skills are needed and what to look for during the application process. So from your different perspectives, can you tell us what you think the most important skill or attribute was for helping you land your first publishing role? So what made you stand out, in other words? Either it was something probably you were told, or maybe what you thought gave you that edge. So Ain, can you go first, please?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I was trying to think about a skill, and I have to say it's really difficult, because obviously if you're trying to start out in the industry, I'm just gonna assume that if you're like a graduate or someone who's like trying to make a transition, you might not have any specialist skills in terms of, production or publicity or even editorial. But when it comes to attributes, I think like something that the industry really values is grit and perseverance. And so if you can kind of like be persistent. I've seen like some of the most successful people within the industry are, and I'm not talking about someone who is at a very high level, even at kind of like, at the beginning of their careers, they are those people that really know what they love and what they want to bring to the industry, and they kind of like persevere. So even if they don't get the first job or the second job, even if they've been like, trying to get in for months and months, they have such a strong voice, and that comes across. And I think particularly, it is really hard right now, and I just want to acknowledge that as well. But particularly now, if you know what you want to bring into the industry, that's exactly the kind of passion and grit that the industry needs to evolve and progress in the right direction. So I would definitely say that.
I think for me, in terms of getting that initial internship, it was the fact that I had a blog, and it was something that I was really passionate about, not necessarily books at all. I'm a huge foodie, so I just posted all the recipes that I'd made at university. And it wasn't necessarily that it was like the most incredible food blog, but it was something that I could write about quite passionately. It was another space for people to see that I was fairly switched on, and that I could hold myself accountable and be consistent with something. And actually, as part of that, as part of the design process, I had learnt a little bit of HTML code. And so when I walked into my digital marketing internship, that was a question they asked me. And I didn't even think about it as something that I could even talk about in my interview. But I kind of said, yeah, well, I needed to change a few things around on the blog platform, and that was really helpful. And I think that definitely, if you don't have a blog, or if you don't have a platform where you can shout about something that really makes you happy, whether it's books or food or movies, definitely do that, because it's such a good way of having yet something else to make you stand out. And in terms of from my internship to my first full-time role, It was just the willingness to learn. I think I really echo what Ain said about having that resilience and that grit, and just turning up every day, always being ready to help out, and especially, you know, when you're in that role and you're learning everything, making sure that you make notes on everything so that you don't have to ask the same question twice. If you do make a mistake, just be willing to own up for it. I think that's like a huge life skill that's really important. But other than that, I think it really is about the passion that you bring to the role.
Sabby.
So I guess because I did unpaid work experience, that was kind of my way to prove myself to the teams that were at Emerald at the time. So, but from doing that 2 weeks work experience, and for them to call me back, that in itself was a really big deal, which at the time I didn't really reflect on that, but now I do. So I must have shown a great deal of maturity to have been called back, and then they were prepared to pay me. But a skill and an attribute, I'm going to name one for each that I think are really important, and I believe that I demonstrated at the time. So the skill is adaptability. You know, we're living in a world and we work in workplaces that are constantly changing, so we have to be adaptable, we have to be agile, we have to be able to embrace that uncomfortableness, not only for ourselves but to support everyone around us, and that those kind of skills and that willingness to really support the team and also your manager will help you to stand out, and it will demonstrate that actually you understand the wider business views and decisions that are being made. I think also if you're looking for a way to demonstrate adaptability, because it is quite difficult to really pinpoint, something I would suggest is really share creative ideas that you have, different solutions that you have, or problems that you've identified that shows that you're embracing the idea of change and you want to make things better. And so something in my current role now, so when I was a junior, I came in and I was managing a few different contracts that were quite complex, and it wasn't my responsibility to make them better, but that's something I wanted to do, and that's something that I carry on doing. So really just bring that determination, and again the resilience that the girls have mentioned, 100%. If I had to choose one word in my life, it would be resilience. And for the attribute, I'm just going to say authenticity. I think that's really important. You need to be yourself, because it's really difficult to, I mean, maybe not for some people, but to keep up a facade. And the more authentic you are, the more you will stand out, if that makes sense. So I guess, so for adaptability, yeah, so you need to be agile and be authentic, because that will help you to build trust and reliability with your relationships, which will go very far.
Yeah, and I'd probably say stuff that would echo what everyone else has said. I think being flexible, for me, that was the most important skill when going to interviews, like being able to pick up new skills really quickly. So I think all jobs in the publishing world are really varied, which is the best thing about them, because you literally will never get bored. They are so fun, so interesting. You will never work on the same sort of project or book twice. So being able to pick up new ideas and new skills really, really fast is really important for the industry, because it's quite fast paced a lot of the time. And I think the most important attribute is enthusiasm, definitely. There's something really important to get across in your cover letters and to get across in your interviews when you go for them too. So make it clear like how much you love books. You know, if you're at this event right now, it's probably definitely the case. So do that in your interview, do that on your cover letter, and also share how enthusiastic you are about the company that you're applying for and how much you believe in what they do. It's really, really important. You know, everyone working in the industry is really driven by that passion, and they want people to join them who share in that passion and who are going to work hard and be a really positive part of the team. So I definitely say show your enthusiasm where possible, you know, show that you've done your research, that you read the sort of books that they publish, and yeah, that'll always go down really well.
Great, thank you. So COVID-19 has completely changed how people at the moment wanting to get into the industry can gain the experience. Can you give any advice to our listeners on how they can get experience for entry-level roles without having to do unpaid internships, which are different from the 2-week work experiences? or to how to get paid internships and schemes that are currently not running, what they can do. If we go to you, Ain, again.
Yeah, so I guess I haven't mentioned this, and obviously I didn't start off during a global pandemic. So again, I think we need to acknowledge that it's just really tough, guys. So don't get discouraged. We all are very aware of what the situation is. But I never did an unpaid internship or unpaid work experience, purely because I was just having to support myself financially through everything, MA and what else. So I don't think that that's essential. What I would say though is, when it comes to what is happening right now, just think about your situation. So if you're just a recent graduate and you're at home and you've got some time in, you know, for to like, you know, I don't know, create a new project or work on something, then do that and kind of like pour out all your creativity and energy into that. Because as I think like Jan was saying, then you can like kind of use that in job applications and in job interviews once the industry just picks up again in terms of recruitment. And if you're not currently just like at home or you're working maybe in something that doesn't feel very related to publishing, then I would suggest have a think about what you can do where you are right now that might not be so immediately linked to publishing, but might still offer you some experience. So if you're working for a company and maybe what you want to do is get into editorial, do they have like an internal magazine? Can you write some pieces for the internal company? Intranet, I'm just like thinking, you know, really try to exploit every single opportunity and reach out to people so that when the time comes for you to apply for a position, then you've got a little bit of a portfolio and you can say, well, I couldn't get obviously an internship in publishing, but I have worked to gain some of the skills that I think are very transferable and can be of help to you and your team.
Right, yeah, transferable skills everyone's always looking for, so that's great advice. Jan?
I perfectly agree with that. Transferable skills are incredible, and for me, I know it must be really difficult because, especially if you're a recent grad, this is the time when you would be going off to interviews and maybe getting feedback and learning on how to improve yourself. I would just say to make sure that you still use this time to skill up. So something that I found really helpful, even though I'm already in publishing, is courses online. There are so many free ones. I signed up for a 2-month free Skillshare course. I took some Adobe illustrating classes for Photoshop, InDesign and Illustrator, and they've been amazing, and they've been such a good thing to be able to add to what I can do as part of my role. And they're now something that I also really enjoy. And I think there's certain programs like Photoshop, like InDesign, that if you can walk into an interview, or if you can just put on your CV that you have expressed an interest and that you do know roughly how to work with it, it looks incredible because it shows that you're dedicated, you've done your research, you have put down the time and the energy to learn what is fundamentally quite a complex program, and it will really set you apart from other candidates.
Thank you. Sabby?
Yeah, so I would just say that the kind of situation that we're in right now is it's very scary, and you know it's very uncertain, but there are also a lot of opportunities that you can create. So thinking about how a lot of publishers have now had to fully move to work from home and flexible working. So I guess if I was in your position and I was starting out from scratch, I'd get in contact with them and use this time that while everybody is still fully remote to do virtual work experience, to get or virtual shadowing. I think I saw on LinkedIn recently, I think it was a publisher in Leicester, I think it's called Sweet Cherry Publishing. They gave some insight into someone who did virtual work experience with them. So I would just encourage people to think a bit creatively, and I know it's scary, but don't be scared to put yourself out there. And something that I didn't have access to when I was 18 is that there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't social media, there wasn't a way to make yourself visible. All of that exists now, so put yourself out there and maybe just use this time to really center on what you have to offer, because once you're clear on that, that's your gift, that's your magic. So you need to get that out there, and it will be seen, it will be heard, but the first step is to get it out there. But I would also say, don't be scared to pivot and adapt again. So just saying that it's not all about how you start, but mostly about your journey and where you finish. So even if your first job isn't in publishing, it doesn't mean that your next role won't be in the industry, or your role after that. So again, just coming back to the transferable skills, they're so important. If you can get experience somewhere else, and just thinking about people's financial responsibilities, those are a real reality for people, and so you have to be smart and sensible. You shouldn't have to work for free. But you can't control what opportunities are going to be paying you at that level, but you can control where you choose to get that experience and then transfer it along into your next step up. So just think about pivoting, adapting, and putting yourself out there, making yourself visible.
Great, thank you. Sabby, was it you who said about the Lessons Learned podcast?
Yes, Lessons Learned, and so that's by Komal Minhas.
Okay.
So she's on Instagram, so I'll spell her name. It's Komal, surname Minhas, Minhas. Her website is komal.com, so please do check her out. She's brilliant.
Okay, thank you. And over to you, Kat.
So I'm just going to echo what everyone else said about transferable skills to start with. So even if you're not getting publishing work experience, any work experience at all you can do is still really important and valid. So even if you are working or will be working in a pub or a supermarket and a shop, those are still giving you really, really important work skills that then you can transfer to a publishing job and you can talk about in your interviews and your cover letter, etc. And then I'd also say at the moment, the one sort of good thing about what's going on at the moment is that there's so much stuff online now. Specifically, I'd look at loads of virtual events. Obviously, you're at one right now, but things like book festivals that obviously happen all over the country that you can't always get to if you live too far away from them. They're all going online. And so I would definitely say just start watching some of those events and just getting an idea of how those events work and the sort of authors that go to those events, and build some awareness of what festivals are like. So for instance, I think Hay Festival did some stuff online. I think it's probably still available. And My Virtual Literary Festival did loads of online stuff as well. So go and have a look at that. And then I'd say try to have a think about the kind of job that you might want to do. And then think about what might be visible online that might help you sort of think about learning about that job role or learning about that area of the industry. So for instance, I worked as a publicist. So if you were interested in publicity, I would say be aware and conscious of where people get their book recommendations. So if you're interested, you could, go listen to Radio 4 potentially, or read newspapers, but also, read people's blogs, go watch people's blogs, look at, Simon Savage and Jen Campbell and Lena Norms and all those amazing people on YouTube. Look at Bookstagram and all the amazing people doing Instagram content on books as well. So have an awareness, because then you can go to an interview, you can say, these are the sorts of places that I want to be working with as a publicist. This is where people get their book recommendations from. So you can still be building your awareness of the industry, without necessarily doing specific publishing experience right now.
Thank you. Speaking of transferable skills, can you give any advice about the best way to present these on applications or on your cover letter or during interviews? A lot of people, I'm sure, think, oh, that will never apply to publishing. So even if it's a little bit more different, how is the best way to present that in applications?
Yes, so I remember having to do this when I just had literally all I had done was delivering pizzas and then working in a fish restaurant. So that was what I could just offer to the publishing industry. I think the most important thing is that you do it in a structured way. So when you look at a job application, look at the skills that they're requiring to do. If they say multitasking, for example, or prioritizing, I would say in an interview, use the STAR method to basically explain what do you mean by the fact that you have been prioritizing in your job, because there might be a bit of a disconnect. Someone who maybe has been in an editorial role for a very long time or in publishing for a very long time might not think that there is much of a transferable skills that you can apply to that department. So make sure that you structure it. and think about the thing that helped me was to just think about just like a situation that I could tell, where I could tell a story about. So I could say maybe I worked in very, very busy restaurant in central London. So I had to like think about how to kind of like, if it was customer service that you're trying to say, you know, how do you maintain a high level of customer services when it's very, very busy? There's customer service in publishing, so people will understand that actually you have quite a talent for making sure that clients are happy, making sure that, you know, like you kind of like think ahead and kind of find solutions whilst there is a crisis going on, or there is like something, you know, a lot happening. So I definitely feel like structuring the way that you illustrate your transferable skill to make it as easy as possible for that person that is listening or reading to make a connection with what could be the situation in their role.
Absolutely, I would say for me, the one thing that I kind of really underestimated that was transferable in the various committee roles that I held as part of my rowing club at university was Excel. It's crazy how much Excel is used in the industry. I mean, in marketing, I know I use it for everything from keeping track of conferences to how many merch items we're sending out. I'm sure these guys could tell you a variety of situations in which just the simple basic things that you probably don't even think about, like Word and Excel and all these programs, have a little part of your CV that says full proficiency in Word and Excel, because that is so useful. And especially for other things, like say you have used Canva for some of your Instagram posts, you know, or just to jazz up a story here and there, that's something that you could use as well, because it shows that you have a good design eye, that you're willing to work with these different programs, and again that you have that impetus and drive to have gone and sort those things out. So I definitely think there's lots of transferable skills, but like Ain said, just remember to structure it in a way that helps the person looking at your CV or in the other room with you when you're interviewing make that connection as easily as possible.
So yeah, it's all about making that connection and connecting with people off the paper and then in person too. So how do you do that? So the structure, I agree with all of the comments about structuring. So really look at what's needed and think about what's needed to be successful in that role. So really unpack it, because you need to be able to understand what that role is as well, because if you're going to go into it and you want to be successful, it's better to do that work beforehand. So break the job role out and assess what competencies are required. So that's quite an important term that is used probably in almost every business. So list out which competencies are important. You know, quite often job descriptions, the competencies are hidden. So, you know, do get a second opinion, ask someone else for their advice. And, you know, if you pick some competencies out, double check it with someone else. If you've got a mentor, check it with them. If you've got colleagues who already work in publishing, or even if they're already working, just run it through them. Don't be scared to ask for help and advice. And another thing I'd say is that if you feel that you don't have the competency or you don't have the experience to demonstrate that you already know how to do something, demonstrate how you're going to go out and get that experience. Show your commitment. So for example, if you've not been in a position where you've had experience of negotiation, but you're applying for maybe a rights assistance role or a sales assistant role, you could say that you've done a course on negotiation, or you've done this course, you've shadowed this person who's talked to you about negotiation, and that's what you've learned and that's what you'll bring to the role. So it's really about extracting that value of the experiences that you have, and also the commitment that you're willing to put in to go out and get the transferable skills that you don't yet have. So again, it comes back to that enthusiasm piece. So if you've got that passion and you bring that purpose into it, then the person on the other side will absolutely see the value that you have to offer, and again, you'll stand out.
Yeah, I totally agree with what everyone said. I think, you know, if I'm approaching a job application, I will read the description, I'll go through with a highlighter and find every single skill that they've mentioned and make sure that in my application I'm talking through every single one of those skills. Because when I was starting out, the mistake I used to make would just be to go into talking about like, this is the job I've done most recently, and this is what I did in that job, and these are the skills that I've got from it. But you should not start from that. You should start from the job description and look at what you're currently doing from the lens of what they want, because often they will have like a checklist of skills, and when they go through different job applications, they will just be ticking it off. So make sure you hit everything that they've asked for. Then I'd also say for interviews, have examples ready for all those generic questions that you're likely to be asked, because they do come up time and time again, those really similar questions. So, you know, tell us a time when you've worked well as a team or independently. Tell us a time when you've used your initiative. Tell us a time when you've made a mistake and you've solved it or made it better in some way. They're all those kind of generic interview questions that I would say always have answers prepared for. And I think most jobs will give you experience that allows you to answer those questions, as well as your education. So, you know, if you've been to sixth form or college or university or whatever, all those things will give you answers to those questions too. And I think particularly at the moment, a lot of people won't be expecting people applying for entry-level jobs to have publishing specific experience. So you're in the same boat as a lot of other people. So just make sure you can tailor what you've done already to that specific job ad that you're applying for.
Amazing, thank you. So I saw someone mentioned in the chat earlier about whether you need to have a degree, and you definitely don't need to have a specific publishing degree to do it. But that moves on to the next question is, what are the benefits of undertaking courses such as a BA or an MA in publishing or any other training? And I think we're just going to direct this to Ain and Kat, but Sabby and Jan, if you have anything to mention afterwards, just put your hand up. So we go to you first, Ain.
Sure. So yeah, so as I mentioned at the beginning, I did complete a master's in publishing. And for me, the main benefit and the main reason why I did it was because obviously being an immigrant and not being familiar with the UK publishing scene, I really needed to understand how everything worked. As you can imagine, publishing is quite different in different countries. I had no contacts, and it was just quite difficult for me, to be honest, to just find resources. So it wasn't something that I did without a lot of thought, because actually MAs are quite expensive. So what I would say is there's definitely a benefit in terms of trying to gain more knowledge, trying to gain more contacts, trying to get a bit of direction, and kind of like build up that sense of community that you might not have if you don't know anyone in the industry already. So the benefits are huge, and I think I'm still kind of like able to refer to the things that I've learned in my MA, and I still have not right now. I can easily say I probably have a contact in every publishing house that is at least in London because of my MA, which is obviously really valuable. But as Kim said, it is not necessary. It's not a requirement for jobs. So, you know, try to think about whether it works for your situation, because I really would hate to think that you have to invest that much money to get into publishing. But if it does help you to gain confidence and it's something that you want to do, then I would definitely recommend it.
That's great, thank you, Ain. Kat, over to you, your experience.
Yeah, so I should probably start this by saying that I'm totally going to be biased, because I am the program leader of the Writing and Publishing undergraduate degree at the University of Derby, and I also lecture on the Publishing MA at the University of Derby. So I will start by saying that it's absolutely not necessary, it's not completely necessary to have a degree of any kind for most publishing jobs, especially a publishing degree or a publishing MA. I did my degree in English literature. So yeah, don't worry if you don't think it's possible for you in any way. It's not going to sort of massively disadvantage you. But I think if you are considering it, there are a lot of benefits to doing one. So it gives you lots of skills and knowledge that I think it would take years to build up just working in the industry. And even though I didn't do a publishing MA, looking back at kind of my first job and all the stuff I didn't know, I do sort of wish that I had. And I think if the one in Derby had been available when I lived in Derby and back then, I think I would have done it. But the other great thing it gives you is lots of networking and lots of opportunities to meet people in the industry, which just isn't possible a lot of the time. If you're outside of London, it is really difficult to meet those people. So at Derby, we have loads of guest speakers come from London and from all the independent publishers from across the country. And I know the other sort of MAs and degrees do the same. So yeah, just this year on my courses, my modules that I teach, I've had 17 guest speakers, and that's just on my few modules. So we have loads, and you can meet those people and get to know what their jobs are really like, and then they can be a contact for you in the future as well, which is amazing. And I think also, yeah, it just gives you a network of peers, which I think is something that's really important. So getting to know people who are going to be working at the same level as you, so you can support each other as you make your way through the industry, is really great too. But I think just generally there are benefits to doing university degrees and courses, and obviously you can, get loans to do them. Like, building your confidence, building your writing skills, your critical thinking skills. So if you want to get into publishing, but you're thinking about doing a degree in something else, that's also valid as well, and that will be helpful to you.
Yeah.
I guess for me, like I said, I didn't do any publishing related degrees. So I did an undergrad in classics at Durham, and then I stayed there to do my MA. But whilst I was there, I focused predominantly on literature, and that for me was really fun. So I guess that kind of echoes what Kat, you were saying about the kind of critical thinking and close reading. But I think there are lots of other ways to get involved. If there are any literary festivals that are going on, I would highly recommend volunteering there. So after I graduated from my master's, I actually went back and helped out at Durham Book Festival, which was an amazing experience because I got to interview Pat Barker. I got to see lots of the archives and the libraries that I'd just never been able to witness before. And I guess there are lots of things that you can do that aren't necessarily related to a degree or a publishing degree that might still be able to really help you stand out.
I was just going to add that the degree that I did was in international business, so it wasn't, but I originally had planned to do English literature and film. That was something that I was interested in. And then I also, through my gap year, I found that I was also interested in international business. So I kind of pivoted there by taking that time. So by having that degree, I think it's helped a lot in my role. So I've not worked as an editor before, which I think is a lot of people come into publishing as editorial assistants. I came in as a sales assistant. So my degree was actually really valuable for the role that I'm doing now. But I would also agree that a degree is not necessary. I think at the time that when many of us were starting out, it almost was necessary. I think a lot has changed, the landscape has changed, and the way to gain experience is different, but it all depends on what is best for you. If you like structure and you want access to really great modules and really great speakers, then absolutely do BA, MA publishing. Just hearing Kat talk about it now, I wish I had done it. Maybe I'll do an MA now. Yeah. So I would say that that's a decision that you have to make. You don't feel that you have to have that decided for you, almost. It has to be done for the right reasons. And I would say that any degree or apprenticeship or any kind of course that you do is beneficial as long as you channel the learnings in the right way.
Thank you. That leads us quite nicely on to the next question, which is, most people, or many people, do dream of working in trade and quite possibly in editorial. So you've all got very vast experiences, so it would be great to learn a little bit more about the benefits of exploring other areas going in and not being necessarily following one path from the beginning. So different areas, marketing, events and licensing, you all have experience there, and also academic versus trade. So it'd be great to know what the benefits are of exploring other options.
Okay, so I never wanted to be an editor. I don't think I will ever want to be an editor. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say it because I just need to clarify this. I don't understand why people are so obsessed with being editors. That being said, my background is in sales and events, and I have worked in academic and trade publishing. At the beginning of my career, it was quite striking. Actually, lots of people told me that I was never going to be able to change between trade and academic. I don't know where this comes from, and I don't know why there is this weird kind of obsession with it, or with trade for that matter, but that's not true. So my first tip would be, please don't get obsessed with what your first job is. Just get into the industry, and then you're going to be able to explore a little bit to see what you like and what you don't like, and then make change. between like, you know, industries or also between departments and jobs. I don't think people should be like stressed about getting pigeonholed, especially right now. You know, the pool of jobs is like quite small, so just focus on getting in. And in terms of like exploring out of the department, I mean, I've had like the most amazing experience working in sales and then making the transition into sales events, which is quite specific and actually wasn't really a thing a couple of years ago. But when you work in sales, you get to travel, you get to meet people. I work in international sales, so you get to meet like different publishers, to hear what's happening around the world. And even if you're working in UK sales, you get to understand like how the market really was, what do the consumers want, what sell, what doesn't. And you do have ultimately a lot of sway into what gets acquired, because sure, editors will make, you know, like a choice based on their taste, on, you know, where they want to take the list. But there is always like an acquisition meeting where there will be like salespeople, publicity people, marketing people saying, actually, this might not quite work the way you were picturing it. So I really, really would invite people to kind of like not glamorize neither trade, publishing, nor being an editorial, because actually it's, you know, trade is just as fun as academic. You just have to find the kind of content and team that work for you. And then I would also obviously invite to look into different things. I think production squad was mentioned. I mean, Robin is doing amazing things to highlight what happens in production roles, which I think is absolutely brilliant. So, you know, do your research and try not to get too obsessed.
I couldn't agree more. You're so right. I think when I first thought about coming into publishing, I was like, oh, well, you know, there's only really being an editor. And as someone who loves books, I'm just going to get paid to sit around and read books all day. And I really don't think that's what, if you speak to most editors, editorial assistants, that's really not what their job involves at all. And so when I came into publishing, I started off in digital marketing, and I saw someone in the chat saying, well, was it worth just getting my foot in the door and then maybe trying transitioning? If that, I think, like I said, that's a great way to do it, but equally don't be scared to fall in love with that part of publishing that you've entered. I wouldn't have said that, you know, I was going to stay in marketing forever, but I really, really enjoy it. For me, it's that nice bridge between editorial and sales where I still get to have a say in what's being published, but I also really get to contribute to the profits and have that kind of Excel numbery side that makes it more easily quantifiable for me. I think for me personally, I really like working in education because it's, some of the people there are just so lovely. I have some like true friends that I've made from my internship and now in my permanent role. I'm lucky enough to work in international, so some of the trips that I've had are pretty incredible as well. And I think also it's something that I'm really passionate about. I did a lot of tutoring when I was at uni to earn some extra cash, and I found that that was really, really rewarding. And so for me, it was just another extension of all the things that I'd really enjoyed that led me up until up to that point.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think there's a perception that really needs to be challenged and changed. I think whenever I tell people that, or people ask me about my job, and I tell them that I work in publishing, they assume that I'm a writer or an editor. So yeah, it's just that's the assumption that exists. And just thinking back to how much I knew about publishing at the age of 18, it wasn't a lot, and it's not very visible about what, and it wasn't until I got into the business that I saw that there's a huge host of roles that function within a publishing organization in order for it to thrive and to work. You know, you've got your group functions, so you've got HR, finance. So if you're interested in working in publishing but not being an editor, not working in sales or marketing or publicity, then you can go into the service function. You can go the HR route, people team route, finance, business partnering for finance. There's lots of different opportunities, and you can actually get junior experience in those roles in different industries and different companies, and then come back into publishing and go into the next step up. So yeah, and when I was also doing my research, I didn't really know what an academic publisher was. What is scholarly publishing? So I'm still learning. But from the 8 years that I've worked in academic and scholarly publishing, I've really loved it. I think it's a wonderful industry to be a part of. Everyone is so collaborative. And in my specific role, I remember when I stepped into this, some of the business partners and clients that I have and I work with are actually competitors. And I found that really strange to begin with. But as I got into the role, as I got to know them, I absolutely love the relationships that I build with them. And it's just really collaborative. And I think it's quite unique to the publishing industry. So yeah, I would also say, I think Kat mentioned the bookseller earlier. So there is, I think in the news section, there's an academic section as well. So if you want to familiarise yourself with what's happening in the academic scholarly publishing industry, check that section out of the bookseller and book brunch. Yeah, I would just direct you to the Society of Scholarly Publishing. I think that's a really great place to start and also to carry on. If I didn't even know that the role that I have now existed back when I was offered it. So that in itself highlights the lack of visibility there is around the kind of roles that exist and that you can step into. You know, people have a lot of transferable skills again, a lot of value that they can offer. And I was able to step into that role for various reasons. But so it just wasn't visible. So what I would suggest to kind of help with that is to be curious and ask lots of questions, try and connect with lots of different people on Twitter and LinkedIn, Instagram. If you go to a conference, go to different types of panel sessions, go to different sessions that you wouldn't normally attend or maybe you might not find interesting. That's also a good way to think, oh, like, you know, that's another area that I could work in within an organization. So yeah, I think also there's associations and societies and institutes. So if you're looking for somewhere locally to work and you're not in London, for example, look for those local university presses or local societies for society publishing. There's a lot of opportunities out there and you just need to get that into your network and start having those conversations.
Thank you, Kat.
Yeah, I agree with everything everyone said. So editorial does tend to be the most competitive area of the industry, and it usually gets hundreds and hundreds of extra job applications than other jobs do. So yeah, going for something like production or rights might be a good way in, because those job ads just tend to get fewer applications. And you know, don't be picky, as everyone has said already. Don't be picky about what your first job is. I think the first publishing interview I got was for a HR job, which is definitely not what I wanted to do, but it was at Penguin, and I was so desperate to work at Penguin. And I didn't get the job because I think, well, I did a terrible job of convincing them I wanted to work in HR, and they said, it's obvious you want to work in marketing, so we're not going to hire you for this job, but we'll keep you in mind. And the very first job I got was for a really commercial imprint, Michael Joseph, that publishes a lot of women's fiction, crime fiction, celebrity books and cookery, which it's an amazing place to work, but it just wasn't quite the right fit for me. But I applied for it anyway, knowing that it would be a good sort of first step and it would get my name known, and it did eventually help me to get what was my dream job, which was working at Vintage, which is more sort of literary books, which suited me better. And same goes for me about being a bit flexible, because so I wanted to work in marketing, but I applied for a publicity job, even though I found the prospect of being a publicist initially quite terrifying, and I didn't know what it involved, and I thought, oh, you have to be really loud and confident, that's not me. But I ended up falling in love with it completely, and then managed to do some marketing within that role anyway, so it worked out really well. So there are a lot of opportunities to move across. So don't think, oh, if I start in one kind of area, I'll never be able to switch to another, because the whole industry is very collaborative. So if you're working in marketing, you will be working with editorial and sales and publicity and everywhere else. So you'll get an idea of what other jobs are like, even if you're not doing your dream job straight away. And a lot of the skills in all of the jobs are really transferable. So being able to write well, communicate well, and at an entry-level role, a really junior role, you know, doing admin stuff, you know, doing Excel, as Jan mentioned, like doing all those sort of office-based tasks, that will give you experience that will allow you to move across to a job anywhere. So I definitely echo what everyone says about don't be picky and just go for, you know, whatever you can.
Thank you, guys. So there are a number of fantastic indie publishers throughout the UK, and Hachette and HarperCollins have announced some more regional offices, which again is brilliant. The industry is still very London-centric. So I'm going to direct this just to Sabby and Kat. What advice would you have for others who feel unable to join the industry as they're not London-based? So if we start with Sabby and then we'll go to Kat, I think.
So I mentioned earlier about really doing research on what opportunities there are available locally. So really looking into university presses, if there's a local society or an institute, they might have a publication. It might be a really small team, but actually that's it. The best way to learn is usually from a small team, because you end up doing a lot more different tasks. So you learn really fast and you grow really fast. But I also think that we're in a very unique point in time. So for the industry, because, you know, everybody is, if not everyone, many people are working from home. We've had to be fully flexible and change and pivot and adapt. So that means I would take that back to the virtual work experience option. Just really try and go after that and contact people, make a speculative application for virtual work experience, put yourself out there. The worst that can happen is that they don't have time to do it. You know, if you've got a laptop, if you've got a phone, if you can provide the equipment and you can show up, just prove to them that there's no reason why you shouldn't get that work experience. So yeah, I think I would make the most of the climate that we're in. Especially because it means that you don't have to commute. There's a lot of people taking advantage of that, in that they don't have to physically be there in order to be seen and be included. So yeah, that's kind of what I would suggest. And once things start to go into a new normal, I guess, I don't think many publishers will go back to fully being in the office. With everything that's going on. So hopefully that means that the industry will move to be more inclusive and diverse as a result of really making the most of the advances in technology that we have, and with people actually moving, you know, if they have hubs in different parts of the UK, I think that would be a really good thing, and hopefully that's something that publishers will look into. From an Emerald perspective, Emerald were already flexible on working from home before the pandemic, so we were all set up from an infrastructure perspective. We've all got our own laptops. We have a great business technology team who manage any technical issues. So we were already in that practice. So we were working from, most people were allowed to work from home at least one day a week. So it's obviously job dependent. If you need to be in the office to do your job, that's different. But if you can work remotely, then that's hopefully that is the shift that will happen. And you know, it's a real opportunity, and hopefully people are looking into it, because it means cost saving for people as well, and just new ways of working. So yeah, I'm all for a more inclusive, more diverse publishing industry, and hopefully flexible working will make some really great strides for that.
I think Sabby, Kat?
Yeah, I so agree with that, Sabby. Like, I really hope that one good thing that comes out of this current moment is more remote jobs. I think that's what we need to open the industry up a bit for people who don't want to move to London for any reason. But yeah, advice other than that is, you know, as Sabby said, do your research, check out if you have any publishers near you. For instance, the Northern Fiction Alliance, which is a group of amazing northern independent publishers who are doing great things. You can have a look at them if you live near to any of those. When things do get back to normal, who knows when that'll be, but there is something called the Spare Room Project. So if you're going for interviews for jobs in London, if you're doing internships and work experience, or just starting out in a job, the Spare Room Project will team you up with someone who already works in publishing, who has a spare room, and then you can stay with them while you sort of get on your feet, or while you're doing a work experience placement and you can't afford to, you know, pay for accommodation. So that's something definitely worth researching in the future when we're all allowed to sort of move around a bit more. And also say, you know, there is a possibility of working in London for a little while and moving out of London, which is what I did, and which is a lot of people do. So I knew that London wasn't the long-term, place I wanted to call home forever. So if you get that experience at a publisher in London, then you can go and do freelance work elsewhere, because you've built the contacts, you've got a network there, and you've sort of built up those skills, which can be really useful. And yeah, I wouldn't sort of underestimate the importance of freelance work for the industry generally. So the industry really relies on freelance book designers, freelance copywriters, freelance copy editors. They're all stuff you can do from anywhere in the country. So if you try and start building a portfolio of work, if that's the kind of thing you want to do, there's a lot of opportunities out there to work for publishers in those sorts of roles. And if you're interested in sort of writing jobs or copywriting in particular, I'd recommend a newsletter called Freelance Writing Jobs, which is written by Sean Meads-Williams, which is amazing. She sends it out weekly, and it just lists loads of jobs where you'd never even think of that as being a kind of copy editing job, or you wouldn't think of researching that company to work for, but there are always loads of opportunities there. Yeah, so I think just keep an eye on things is also what I'd say. Like, with Hachette moving, with this Harper North imprint, I would just try and keep as up to date as you can. If it was me and I lived up north and Hachette were opening offices near me, I would just keep an eye on what they're doing. And as soon as those jobs come up, I would just pounce on that. So yeah, try and keep as updated with the industry as you can, read the bookseller, be on Twitter. And so when those jobs do come up, you can be the first to apply for them.
Thank you, that was really great. I think we should open to attendee questions now, as we're into that stage of the session. So I've got one here about cover letters. So I'd love to know, when we get questions, don't need to read that bit. So how would you approach being enthusiastic in cover letters without coming across as inauthentic? So I don't know who wants to take this first. Kat?
Can I? Yeah, so if I was approaching a cover letter, I'd very much start with 3 things, which is why you want to work in publishing, why you want to work at that particular company, and then why you want to work in that particular area or that particular job. I would make sure that you're hitting those 3 things. And yeah, it is difficult, but I would just say be as specific as possible. That was the best advice and most useful advice I got when I was starting doing job applications, is be specific about that company and the sort of books that you enjoy that they publish, because that will stand out more to those employers. So yeah, I think that's where the authenticity comes from, is just being really, really specific. So when I applied for the job I got at Vintage, I knew that the books that I loved there were the graphic novels. They have a great list of graphic novels and they're literary fiction. And I got the job of kind of giving up lots of enthusiasm and having done my research on that side of things. But then the other person who was doing the same job as me went to the interview and said she loved their poetry list and she loved their translated fiction list, which is obviously completely different to what I said, but she also got the job because she was specific and it was clear that that's what she was really passionate about. So don't feel like you have to be passionate about everything they do and everything they publish, but give as many specific examples as you can, I would say.
Great. Anyone else want to add to that? Give me a wave. Yeah.
Just super quickly, make sure that you check the name of the person you are sending your cover letter to. This is something that I think someone said to me and I was like, oh, I'll never make this mistake. And then lo and behold, I did. It's a horrible moment, but just make sure that you double check and triple check everything. I think especially in publishing, our industry doesn't look upon spelling mistakes very kindly. So make sure that you're putting your best foot forward in that sense. That's just a please learn from my mistakes element.
Anyone else have a comment?
I guess just quickly on the spelling mistake, if like me, English is not your first language, just put everything through Grammarly and ask a friend to reread it, because I know it's challenging. So yeah.
Thanks, guys. So another question from the chat is about the structuring of your CV. So if you could just think about maybe some of the CVs you've seen, the CVs that you have, is there a general structure that you think works particularly well? Anyone want to pick that one up?
I've seen my fair share of CVs, and actually it's so difficult because I never realized before looking at CVs for people that were applying for jobs, that I was looking at how many different structures and templates and things you can use. what I would like highlight is that hiring managers or HR managers really look at a CV very, very quickly. So make sure it's not crowded. Make sure you've got a really good personal statement at the top that uses the exact key, I'm not even kidding, the exact keywords that are used in the cover letter. If they're looking for someone enthusiastic, hopefully you are enthusiastic, don't lie about that. Use that so that they can kind of quickly scan through. And then I would just say, I know that sometimes you want to just like add so much stuff, but it can be quite overwhelming for someone that is reading so many applications. So make it structure, make it brief and concise, and use the keywords that are indicated in the job description.
Really useful feedback, thanks, Ain. Anyone else got anything to add on CV?
Some useful advice that I was given was instead of necessarily, if you've got a few job roles that you've done through the years, you can, instead of listing them just chronologically, you could have a section that's just either recent work experience or relevant work experience. So that's what I ended up doing, as I picked up a few more kind of publishing and book related jobs, just so that at the top of your CV is the most relevant stuff, and their eyes will go to that straight away.
I would say if you're looking at any role that involves an element of design, try and show some kind of design creativity, personal flair, bring that through. Use Canva, that's what I did for all of my internships and interviews. And I think it's just a really good way of making sure that they know that you're someone who's creative and has a good design eye from the get-go, and that can really help you stand out if that's the kind of job that you want to get into.
Do you have anything to add, Sabby?
Again, I'd just say keep it concise, keep it specific. Think of it as your elevator pitch or lift pitch, which is something that's a concept that's quite common in sales. But it's you're pitching yourself on paper, so just imagine. It is difficult to imagine the person on the other side reading that, but the more applications that you do, the more you'll see how actually you do need to tailor your CV actually. So if you're applying for, if you switch, so you know, I interviewed someone who had originally I think applied for an editorial role. They were then recommended to apply for sales, and they changed their CV, they adapted it, and that in itself shows that, you know, they've taken the time to commit to changing tracks there. So, and with the sales role, again, it was a visibility thing, or I think it came up a little bit later. So yeah, it's just always think about the role in mind, be specific, be concise, and like Ain said, be punchy.
Thank you. I've got another question here, which is about diversity in publishing. Is the industry moving towards including a more diverse workforce? They've just briefly detailed they've had some negative experiences and are hesitant to apply for roles in the industry. So I think they want some reassurance. What's happening in publishing that you know of that is leading to a more diverse workforce? Would anyone like to start?
Maybe I can just like say from my point of view what's going on at Penguin Random House. So obviously, without going too much into the details, there's definitely been conversations, and some of the conversations haven't been particularly nice. So we're all getting real uncomfortable and taking a really hard look at how we can improve things. We're nowhere near close to making the shift that the industry needs to do. And I'm hoping that what has been happening in the past few months has kind of like really made people understand the urge that needs to be in terms of making that shift. And I also hope that, I'm really sorry to hear that someone has had a bad experience. I just want to acknowledge that that we know that these are happening, because sometimes in publishing we just all go, I'm so sorry you had that. I've seen people behave in ways that were inappropriate. I know that I also probably many times have behaved in ways that were not appropriate. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that, we apologize, and we kind of follow through with a very, very clear action plan to make that change.
I think for me, I really am very hopeful that the industry is moving towards a more diverse and inclusive system, but I do think that a lot of that is because there are still elements, like this person has mentioned, where people aren't necessarily able to understand or have a full scope of what people might be going through when they come into that interview room, how hard it has been for someone who to get into that room in the first place. And I guess my advice for that is know that you belong in publishing if that's where you want to be, and when you're there, carve a space out for yourself, bring that passion, bring that enthusiasm, make sure that you're saying yes to all the things that you think will help you, and know that no is a complete sentence. And don't let people take advantage of you if you think that that's something that's happening to you. And definitely, if you do feel like it's a real thing, please find someone to talk about it with. At HarperCollins, we have an amazing network called Elevate, where it's just a safe space for BIPOC employees to congregate and talk and just have a chance to, I guess, breathe. And that for me has been incredibly helpful. So if you're currently part of a company where that isn't the case, maybe look at setting one up with the help of HR, but equally just make sure that you're really looking after your mental health in the process of trying to get into the industry. It shouldn't take a toll on you in that way.
Abby?
So yeah, I'm sorry to hear that someone has had to go through that. I think it is very uncomfortable, and it's in publishing has a reputation for being very nice, and even when they're not, even when they're trying to be honest, it's always in a nice way. So as I remember, someone once said to me, it was a mentor actually, if you're going to deliver bad news, or if someone is delivering bad news, do it with a smile. And I found that really contradictory to myself, and I don't really see that as being authentic. But it's just it's one of those textbook concepts that come out, and when people share that with you, I think the important thing is to actually think for yourself that actually I don't agree with that, and I don't want to treat people in that way. So a lot of it is about having that courage and that conviction in yourself, that once you also get into publishing, that you should really help and to empower and uplift other people up as well. So there's been lots of talks about conformity in publishing. So once people are in, they're just conforming to the standards and expectations, and then it just carries on. It's just a circle. So experiences that I've had is that, quite often I have seen people conform and they will get promoted, and it's very challenging to see that. So one side of it is coming into the industry is difficult because there might be some bias there, but also once you're in, it's how do you then pave that career development pathway. And so that's challenging. So what I would suggest is to get yourself a mentor, really invest in a support system for yourself, a mentor that you trust, colleagues and other people that you look up to, build genuine relationships and connections, because there's going to be lots of times where you go through uncomfortable things and you shouldn't have to deal with them on your own. You shouldn't have to dwell on them, and the worst part is when you think that you've done something wrong. So you really do need to build that support system. And in terms of diversity and equity and inclusion, these are really important conversations that from what I'm seeing and what I've experienced, that a lot of publishers are having now, and they're open to that. So that's a really big step, and it is a stride, but there's still so much work to do. So at Emerald, it's pretty much at the forefront of we have one of our strategic pillars is acting as a responsible business. So that is now part of that element. It's there to become embedded in the business, and the more that other publishers and other organizations do that, it just becomes normal. So we have an internal program called Stride. So we run lots of different themed events. So this year we have, so we've done an event each quarter. So it's been, quarter one was neurodiversity, quarter two pride, 3 is going to be religion, and 4 is going to be class. So there are people are having the conversations. We also have a top level equality, diversity and inclusion steering committee. So people at that senior level do care, so they do want to do something, and I think half the battle is that they don't really know where to start, or they don't know how to affect that change. So I guess I remember someone saying that, you know, if you're unhappy with something, become part of the solution to help change that, rather than waiting for it to happen. And so that's why I am involved in those committees. I also work with the Society of Scholarly Publishing, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, so that's at an industry level, so that's a lot more objective, and we will be looking at launching a web page of resources on diversity and inclusion, so please do check that out. I think there's not enough centralised resources out there specific to publishing. It's not something people want to talk about, and hopefully we can kind of overcome that stigma together. There's a lot of barriers, a lot of complex barriers, but I would say please focus on building that support system and building that resilience within yourself. Don't feel like you need to, so if you can't get into the industry, don't feel like you can't step away and then come back, but also if you're in the industry, don't feel like you have to leave because you don't belong. So like Jan said, you do belong and you do matter, and you should stay if that's what you're passionate about and that's where your purpose lies.
Thank you. Well, we're actually coming to the end. It's whizzed by completely, which has been great. We've managed to get through lots of questions, but not all of them. So I think what we're going to do is, if you put questions in the chat, we're going to copy them across to SIP London, who hopefully get around to answering them. But also, if you go on Twitter and you use the hashtag SYPinto and tag SYP London and BookMachine, then hopefully maybe some of the panellists, maybe someone else who works in the industry can get around to helping to answer some of those questions. But now I think we're just going to say a big thank you to all of the panellists who've come along on this Saturday. It has been very informative, so a big thank you to everyone. We've recorded this session and it'll be sent to everyone afterwards, so there'll be plenty of time to go through and look for it. But if anyone on the panel wants to leave with a parting word, just let me know. No, I think that's it then. So big thank you to everyone who's come. There's lots of thank yous going on, so that's great. And good luck, everyone. So thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Good luck.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.